And they had just simply not asked if it was appropriate to do that. And so it had triggered some intrusion alarms and that sort of thing. And so there was a lot of client upset, screaming. Actually, this guy had some temper problems. And then I was essentially brought up to say, look, you need to be better about you leading your teams. At the time, I was like, hey, I'm there to do a job. I'm there to make sure that the client is successful. And that's what it took. Right. So that was the challenge. I suddenly find myself potentially losing the promotion. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership. A lot of things that have been coming up in my life lately, and I've realized that I've not been alone in certain things. And so that's a little bit of a preview for what's to come. But I'm hearing from a lot of folks out there that they are feeling very isolated, very much alone in IT when they're told to lead a team. And so I wanted to address some things with that today. I wanted to give you a little bit of background first. I want to highlight something that happened after 10 years into my IT career, as I was asked to take on a leadership role within a team. And so it was not only leading the team, but there was also some mentoring and that sort of thing involved. I was working with Citrix Consulting at the time, and they asked if I'd be willing to lead teams with their newer junior consultants that are just coming out of new hire training. The idea is that spending some time with me and being with projects and having that practical field application, they'd be able to advance. And I'm proud to say that a lot of folks that were in that program were able to advance and do great things within the Citrix Consulting organization. So have gone on to be in sales, and one or two that were actually on my initial teams have now gone on to leadership positions within Citrix. And so I have a little bit of a point of pride with that, but it didn't start that way. Not even close. In fact, to starting that way, it was actually pretty rough. So to give a little bit of a why there, I very much was a solo guy. I was always the Citrix guy. And when I mean I mean the. In other words, nobody else knew what I knew. And that became the hallmark of my career for a long time. Now, let's be honest here. It's not like I necessarily knew everything about it. My Google flu was strong far before most people's Google flu became strong. So honestly, it was one of those things where I was perceived as knowing how to do stuff and knowing things. And really what it really boiled down to was I just was becoming really good at figuring things out and putting them together in my head and seeking out knowledge that I didn't have in a quick and efficient way. That really was the hallmark of my career. But for some reason, that translated well into me being in the field as a consultant. And so in under a year of me doing that, I was asked to take on this role of what they called a resident. I very quickly found that there were expectations along with that. There was a incident I've talked about a couple times where there was a customer that was very, very upset. It was because of something that a member of my team had done with good intentions. They really wanted to get a head start on some things that we were there to do. And they had just simply not asked if it was appropriate to do that. And so it had triggered some intrusion alarms and that sort of thing. And so there was a lot of client upset, screaming. Actually, this guy had some temper problems. And I basically did my very best to stay in front of my team with that, to shield them from it. But unfortunately, I think through whatever reason, it came across differently. And I found that, I don't know what the right way to say this is, but I was essentially brought up to say, look, you need to be better about you leading your teams and that sort of thing. And you need to be, focused on their growth, and you need to be worried about this kind of thing. And I was like, at the time, I was like, hey, I'm there to do a job. I'm there to make sure that the client is successful. And that's what it took. Right. So that was the challenge. I suddenly find myself potentially losing the promotion, I guess you could say, that I'd had, or this position, because I wasn't doing something that apparently was expected of me, but was never really explained that it was expected of me, that I was there to mentor these people to advance their careers and get them better. But that had never happened in my life. That had never happened in my career. So that was a big part of the challenge. What I found was that I had made a critical error in not understanding something that was expected of me. And this happens, right? We find that we don't always know all the expectations, or people will just make assumptions. Oh, you've been in this for, over a decade. You surely must know these things, right? Even though my experiences and the reason that I was perceived as the technical juggernaut that I was had nothing to do with working with teams, or nothing to do with working in an enterprise like many people had the experience of. And so I had that gap. Now, I want to explain what the gap was, and kind of the title of this episode kind of gives it away. What was the biggest problem I had as a leader? And that was that I thought that it all rested on me. That I thought that other people were just there to observe what I was doing and learn from me. And that was that's what they're being paid to do. Literally had a client at one point that expressed concern about that. It's just like, why am I paying for these other people to be here when it's just you doing all the work? And that was actually my first clue as to what the actual problem was. And the actual problem was that I was the one doing all the work because I didn't trust other people to do the work. I was the one that was responsible. I was the one that had to be knowledgeable, right? Well, here's the lesson. The lesson, it's a twofold lesson, by the way. The first part of the lesson is that how work works is in what I'll talk about here in a minute, called the theory of constraints. It was brought up in the book The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. We'll talk about, like I said, we'll talk about that in more detail, trust me. And again, in the Phoenix Project, which is another great book that I highly recommend. But the problem is that you only are able to progress at your constraints. Well, me being the one that's knowledgeable was a constraint, right? Yeah. We could only do as much work as I could do at that point. And so what I had to learn to do was to appropriately trust and delegate to other members of my team. And the way I eventually came to this, I'm skipping to the end because I don't want this to take forever, but I do want to tell you, just kind of give you some initial advice here, is it came down to communication. At the beginning of each week, I would try to insist that people get there early so we could have some time to sit down with coffee and whatnot and get to know these folks. Because a lot of times I was just getting, it felt like they're just being dumped on me. But I had a lot of people that came into my teams. So I very rarely had the same exact team of people. And usually it was two junior consultants that were with me. And so, yeah, I never always had the same ones. And so what I would do, either in an email in advance, is what I eventually got to the point of doing, saying, okay, we're going to do this project. Here's a summary and all those kind of things. But what I want to know from you is, what kind of things do you feel strongest in? What kind of things do you want to develop in? And what is your goal for this particular engagement? What do you want to get out of this? So once I started asking those questions of my team, then I started to get a sense of how I could get them more and more engaged in things. And it wasn't just to do that. The honest truth is, my mindset at the time was not necessarily get other people growing. It's something that I really became excited about very quickly, but initially it really was just survival. Like I said, I was under the impression that my future was at risk, and everything I had built up was now coming to a point of having maybe 90 days to fix. And so I was really focused on making sure that customers were still happy while I learned this mystery. And yeah, it really was about that. So that was a big part of it. The second part of this, I think I developed later on, that I wish I would have known at the first place, and being able to really truly articulate. And the saying goes that if you are the smartest person in the room, that you're in the wrong room. Sounds odd, I know. If you're hired to do a job, you're hired to do a job, right? Well, the problem is, sometimes you are the smartest person in the room, but your orientation needs to be that you're not. So even though I knew the answers and could back people up, what I had to learn was to let others participate. This is still hard for me. To this day, it's very hard to, it's one of the things that I struggle with the most. There's a person that wrote a book on coaching called The Coaching Habit, actually. And one of the, I'm going to mess this up, but one of the things he talks about is the advice monster. And basically, it's like, don't be the advice monster. And that's me. I am the person that just wants to just step in and fix things. I'm that much of an engineer, at heart, that I want to step in and fix the problem. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Well, the problem with that is that sometimes other people need to be the ones to do that and fix the problem. This is what I love about the Phoenix Project, by the way, is that's the discovery that was made, is that you had the character called Brent. And Brent was this person that was always doing everything and being the go-to guy for everything. And so nobody else ever learned. Nobody else was ever challenged to learn, which is kind of one of those keys there. Like I often say, that you won't rise to the occasion. You only rise to your level of preparedness. And so if you are not being challenged to get to a new level, then you're always going to stay where you're at. And anything else beyond that is going to be a crisis. And so if you aren't regularly being appropriately challenged with new things, then even if somebody else already knows the answer. And so I had to face a true dilemma of being slowed down heavily. And how do I purposely allow myself to slow down? And this is the big challenge that was put forward in a book that I read later that has been transformative to me, in fact, and is forming my current book project. So Eliyahu Goldratt's The Goal is today's resource of the week. I chose this, even though it is something where it's like, I'm giving you links that are affiliate links, which full disclosure here means that I'm compensated whenever you use these links. But the idea here is that I want you to consume these. And so if you choose not to use my affiliate links and you just choose these on your own and get these on your own, I will not be offended in any way. I'm not keeping track. That's fine. So the idea with The Goal is a fictional story. Basically, it's a novel, and it's about a guy named Alex. And Alex is a plant manager that is being threatened with his job. Sound familiar? And the thing that happens here too is that, like any good story, there's like an enemy or a challenge that needs to be solved. And they're just losing money left and right, and they can't figure out why. There's always a crisis, and there's always things keeping him up. And his marriage is falling apart because he's always at work trying to fix problems. And so he meets someone, or actually reintroduces himself to someone that is kind of the author injecting himself into the story in a character called Jonah. And so Jonah becomes the guide for Alex to learn how work works. And so I'm not going to give away everything about this, but I will say that this book transformed the way manufacturing works. It has been that much of an impact. And so I very much recommend that you get this. And it's because it's a novel, it's actually really easy to go through. But what I'm going to do is encourage you to get this. And then in a few weeks, we're going to talk about the implications of this has for AI. And so I really do want everybody to read this, and we're going to be diving in to a lot of this story. But one of the things about this book that's really most important is the theory of constraints. And they realized that their automation, their robots basically, represented a constraint. And so that means that there's only so much that can be done if that is their constraint. And so they had to form their processes around that, basically, because just being able to produce more does not make you more productive. And that is what I was getting at with this whole lesson that I'm in for today. The idea here is that you have constraints, but you actually need to slow down your production to meet them. And so what I had to do was force myself to be willing to do less work. In other words, to know that I was going to fall behind on my projects because I was letting other people take on tasks. And I had to learn a lot about that in terms of not being a taskmaster, but letting people have responsibilities, and then learning the hard way, like I was saying earlier in the episode, of of having these things where it's just like, yeah, they can have responsibilities, but you need to teach them and equip them for that. So in terms of being the smartest one in the room, I might have known the answers, but I needed them to be the smartest person in the room, which is ultimately what I'm talking about here, is that you need the people that are on your team to be the smartest people in the room, even though you already know the answers. That's mind blowing for a few of you out there. And there's a few of you out there that are probably saying to yourself right now, well, that may mean that I don't have a job. Take a deep breath and realize that you're more valuable if you can do this. You are more valuable to a company. You're more valuable to your team. You're more valuable to everything about a project if you can be that person that is letting someone else be the smartest person in the room. So what are the results of all this? What ended up happening? And this is the good news, is that I actually took some time away from Citrix Consulting after all this. I got through a big portion of it, and then I took some time away just to do that. But before that, what ended up happening was I said, look, I need some resources here. I can't do this on my own. And ultimately, what that looks like is I had to say, I need to not be the team lead. I need to be the person that's under another team lead that knows what they're doing, so I can discuss with them how to do that. So let them lead a project so I can learn the constraints. And so much like in the goal, they go around each process and figure out what's going on with each and how they all work together to make work actually happen. And so instead of focusing on individuals, they focus on the entire workflow. And like I said, I'm not going to give it away. There's a lot here. We're going to dive into this, trust me. But the idea here was that I needed to not be the smartest person in the room for a little while and do that in that kind of way as well, I guess you could say. And so the lessons learned from that set me up for success later and made my processes better and better and better as I went on. And so as I was taking this break, this hiatus from consulting work, being at home with my wife for a change, I did some other work and realized in watching things from a technical from a corporate standpoint, just how this all worked together in the long run instead of just weeks at a time like I had been doing. And one of the things that came to me was that I needed a mission. I needed a mission statement. And that's where Leave the World Better You Found It actually came up for me, was during that time of figuring out that was my life mission. And so that really was it. So ultimately, what ended up happening with that was I took that mindset into every single week. How can I leave the people that are with me better than I found them? And the relationships that came out of that, the financial success that came out of that, and just everything else that's been in my life has been a result of that. And so that's why I actually have done the things that I've done, especially in the last few years. But I am going to say that I'll go ahead and announce this now, that I have decided to pivot into doing this, what I was doing for these groups, to be more of an outreach. I guess outreach probably is the wrong word, more of a resource for multiple different companies at the same time, multiple peoples at the same time. And so in 2025, I am officially launching a coaching program that will be for those individuals that are kind of newer to leadership or that just have been put in these roles and they're feeling overwhelmed. What I want you to know is you're not alone. What I want you to know is that you don't have to go through this and figure it out on your own. Just like I asked for help, you can ask for help. You can get this help. You can have these resources. And so what this is going to look like initially is a 6-month kind of cohort of people. And so there'll be people that are all gathered together, and I'll be coaching them individually and as a group. And we'll be going through 6 basically modules through those 6 months. And we'll be figuring out together what kind of things are needed for you, but also some learning that's in the case here. So it's coaching and training at the same time, really. But the idea here is to get past these blocks that you have. But the key here is that you're not alone. And I know this because I've been talking to so many of you that are facing the same challenges where you've been in technology for a while now and you're put into positions of having to lead teams. You're a quote unquote senior person. And now you are faced with these challenges. It's a thing, right? It truly is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And so if you don't deal with it, then, hey, you know what? You're never really going to get past where you are. And unfortunately, I don't mean to be scare tacticy here or whatever, but the unfortunate reality is that those that have challenges of being able to succeed in leadership sometimes will be let go as a restraint that's not been properly addressed. And others will be brought up to do that. And once you've been in a leadership role, it is really, 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 really difficult to go down to something else. And so I hate to say this way, but the honest reality is if you don't learn how to be a good leader and you don't know how to be successful in that, then there's no way forward and there's definitely no way backwards. So you know what that means, right? That means stagnation. And I don't want to see that for you. So that is why I'm offering this coaching. If you want to learn more about that, there'll be a link in the description there or in the comments section where you can actually schedule a time with me. The idea here is that just spend a half hour with me, let me know what your challenges are and that sort of thing. And I'll determine if you seem like a good fit. And then we'll go from there is the way that works. And so it's a way you can just schedule time on my calendar, just find a time that works for you and works for me at the same time. Beauty of automation and our modern life. It's not hard to find a way to connect. And so I'm encouraging you, if you're feeling like you are either a newer team lead or you've been doing it for a while now and you just don't feel that you're moving forward or you don't feel like you're successful at it, engage me with that. And we'll see if this coaching program is the right fit for you. And yeah. So that's the big announcement for today. But yeah, so I do encourage you today, like I said, to get the goal. And I would get it on audio. Honestly, on Audible is one of the best ways to do this because the edition that they have there is dramatized. And so you'll have like music, you'll have different voices. You can even hear kind of an echoey part for Alex's thoughts. And so it's narrated by him, basically. And so it's really cool. Honestly, the goal is just a transformative book. Not terribly long to listen to, but it has a huge impact. And so I hope that will impact you as well. And as far as leadership goes, huge. And even understanding how just work works in general, whether you're in IT or not, doesn't matter. The goal is huge for that. And so I'm going to encourage that. Also, as we close up today, I wanted to give thanks to our seasonal sponsor, which, okay, it's me. As we go along here, we'll have other sponsors that are involved. But for now, this is just me. Basically, the concept here is that you just give me some feedback as far as the things that are going on in your life, the gaps that you're seeing. So it's sort of like what I'm just finding with what I was finding back in the day with, I have this gap and I don't understand. I don't understand why all of a sudden people are now criticizing me and potentially putting me in a report and maybe I'll lose my job because of something I didn't realize was going on. So if you have challenges like that in your life, go ahead and tell me a little bit about that. And so it's just a little form that you can do anonymously if you like, or whatever. And it's out there and you can give me some feedback on that. What kind of challenges are you having right now? And so I'm able to do that. And as a reward for that, my goal is to get you resources in that regards, not only for this podcast and episodes of that nature. Like I said, I'm responding to a lot of feedback that I've been hearing about people that are in this position that I was 10 years ago. And so I'm responding to that. And so this is a way for you to help me understand the challenges that you have. So the question that'll be asked of you is, what is your biggest challenge right now? And so if you have roadblocks, if you have things that are tripping you up, not necessarily from the technology standpoint, although that is your biggest thing, you think that's your biggest challenge, go ahead and put it down. But I'm wanting you to think more in terms of what's holding you back in your career in technology. And those are the kind of things that I can make some content to help you with and help others with in so doing. And the reward for that, I'm going to give you a copy of my book. All you have to do is just name your own price. Whatever you think is fair, cover the shipping, it's yours. And yeah, cover the printing, shipping, whatever. I'm not going to make any profit on it. It's yours for the taking. So Just Do This is a book that really focuses in on these lessons that I learned the hard way, and I don't want you to have to learn the hard way. So that's why these resources were here. And so sign up for the book. Name your own price. It's fine. I'll be okay. Don't worry about it. As long as you cover the printing and the shipping, whatever it costs. I mean, I know that the hardcover costs like $48 on Amazon. You want to give me $48 to say thank you for this episode? Hey, I'm not going to complain about it. But honestly, whatever's fair, whatever works for you, that's good for me. So just answer one question about what challenges you're facing, and have access to that ability to get that at whatever price you like. You want to buy it for your whole entire team? Well, let me know. I have a special link for that. So you don't have to go through this process every now and over again as they went into a quantity, but that requires a different link. So if that's something you want, just let me know and we can make that arrangement. Excellent. Well, hey, you know what? I wanted to say thank you again for joining us. It's a new experience, right? We're pretty early on in the process, so we're learning lots of things. And I do encourage you to, like I said, to reach out, have a call with me, and let me know just your thoughts in general. It's all good. So remember, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's the big lesson for today. I hope that's helpful to you, and we'll see you next time.